The palace didn't just respond to the surrogacy scandal surrounding Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. According to royal watchers, they may have accidentally made it worse. Because after years of silence, years of whispers floating through dark corners of the internet, Buckingham Palace finally found itself cornered by a question it could no longer pretend didn't exist. And what shocked people wasn't what the institution said. It was what it carefully avoided saying. No direct denial, no forceful shutdown, no emotional defense, just cold royal silence wrapped in polished language. And suddenly, the internet exploded with one terrifying thought: what if that silence was intentional?
He was also furious about the whole surrogacy business and all of the speculation.
Again, this fairy tale has become somewhat of a scary tale. You know, it's
around Meghan Markle's pregnancies for years. From oddly angled baby bumps to photograph sessions that felt more performance art than
I think she would need a surrogate. She also lost a child before Lily. And if she has a child through a surrogate, then that child is not.
Very excited to announce that Meghan and myself had a baby boy early this morning. Think of a better place to announce the upcoming baby. Be it a boy.
Also, too, Prince Harry's name was changed and the word prince was added to the original. What is
20, right? This is supposed to be that Archie.
Okay, yeah. So he's about
social media and online was when I was pregnant with Archie and with Lily and with a newborn with each of them.
Before, when it comes to kids, I feel like it's a little bit of a dicey area, but today we're just taking a look at the facts and how the public relates.
Having been brutally dismissed. This new reporting coming from Rob.
Destructive.
not to this extent.
Sowing more doubt. Meghan's estranged father told a television host he'd never seen his daughter truly pregnant, and
she had believed that because Meghan had allowed her to believe.
Meghan and Harry have, and gave them public titles, so therefore they have a responsibility to those kids.
Strategy. So effectively, he does want to be operating as an independent monarchy.
3 days old, he had his first audience with the Queen. The picture released on the couple's Instagram.
Thank God she did, because otherwise I was going to a large extent be alone.
For years, the allegations surrounding Meghan and Harry existed like background static, easy to mock, easy to dismiss. Most mainstream media outlets refused to touch it because the topic sounded too explosive, too dangerous, too reckless. But then something changed. The same questions started appearing everywhere at once. Different outlets, different commentators, different royal insiders. Yet somehow the same unresolved suspicions kept surfacing over and over again. And once repetition enters public conversation, perception changes fast. What used to sound insane suddenly starts sounding possible simply because people keep hearing it repeatedly. That's exactly what happened here. Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet weren't just celebrity children anymore. They were children connected to the royal line of succession. And inside the monarchy, succession is not treated like gossip. It is treated like constitutional survival. That's when the pressure shifted away from Harry and Meghan personally and landed directly on Buckingham Palace itself, because once questions begin circling around succession, silence becomes dangerous. People began re-examining old interviews, birth announcements, timelines, medical details, public appearances, even body language. Moments that once looked ordinary suddenly appeared suspicious through this new lens. And the most unsettling part? No new evidence was actually needed. The same information people had ignored for years suddenly started looking different simply because audiences were now emotionally primed to question everything. Then came the moment that pushed the controversy fully into mainstream attention. Lady Colin Campbell stepped into the conversation publicly, and when Lady C talks about the royal family, people listen because she speaks with the confidence of someone who knows where the bodies are buried. She didn't invent the allegations, but she dragged them out of the shadows and threw them directly into public discourse with frightening force. Suddenly, this wasn't just internet speculation anymore. Now a recognizable royal commentator was openly questioning transparency surrounding the births tied tied to the monarchy. Her argument hit a nerve because it connected modern controversy to centuries of royal tradition. Historically, royal births were handled with extreme public verification precisely to eliminate doubt before it could spread. Government officials once attended royal births. Medical confirmations were treated as institutional necessities, not private family matters. Lady Colin Campbell argued that those traditions existed for a reason, and that reason never disappeared. According to critics, the gap between historical royal transparency and the way Archie and Lilibet's births were publicly presented became the crack where suspicion exploded. Then came her most devastating line. She described Harry and Meghan's public image as wonderful works of fiction, and that sentence detonated online. Supporters called it cruel, critics called it revealing, but nobody ignored it. Suddenly, every outlet wanted to revisit the controversy. Anonymous palace sources started appearing in tabloids. Commentators dissected timelines. Royal watchers compared past royal birth procedures to the Sussexes' announcements. And once that machine starts rolling, it feeds itself endlessly. The real danger wasn't the allegations themselves. It was what the allegations were doing to the monarchy's image. Because the royal family survives on public trust and ritualized certainty, the moment uncertainty enters the room, the entire institution starts looking fragile. Critics demanded reassurance. Defenders argued the Sussexes deserved privacy. And suddenly, two modern ideas smashed violently into each other. One side insisted succession requires maximum transparency. The other insisted personal medical privacy still matters even for royals. Neither side backed down. That collision became the controversy itself. What made everything even more explosive was the absence of visible proof. Not proof against Harry and Meghan, proof in general. Critics pointed out there were no publicly emphasized medical confirmations presented in the familiar traditional style royal audiences had come to expect. Defenders responded that times had changed and modern privacy standards made those expectations outdated. But by then, the internet had already moved beyond facts into perception. And perception is where scandals become unstoppable. Because once audiences begin treating missing details as clues, every silence becomes suspicious. Every routine decision suddenly looks strategic. Then Buckingham Palace made the move that truly changed everything. They stayed quiet, completely quiet. No direct denial, no official confrontation, no forceful shutdown of the rumors. Just the monarchy's ancient philosophy in action, never explained. Under normal circumstances, that strategy protects the institution because engaging with speculation often gives it legitimacy. But this time, the silence backfired horribly. Instead of calming the public, it intensified suspicion. People started reading beneath every royal statement, searching for hidden meaning in what was omitted instead of what was said. And suddenly, the palace found itself trapped by its own traditions. If they responded directly, critics would say the scandal was serious enough to require damage control. But by refusing to respond, they allowed the internet to interpret silence as confirmation. It became a no-win situation. Worse still, audiences noticed the palace had responded publicly to other controversies involving Meghan in the past, including bullying allegations. So critics asked the question that refused to die: if the institution could respond there, why not here? What made the situation spiral completely out of control was not a bombshell revelation. It was repetition, endless repetition. The same questions recycled across headlines, commentary videos, anonymous insider quotes, social media threads, reaction channels, and tabloid panels until audiences no longer processed them as theories. They processed them emotionally like unfinished truths waiting for confirmation. And that is exactly how modern scandals evolve. Not through evidence alone, but through atmosphere, through tone, through suggestion, through a feeling that something underneath the surface refuses to settle. Tabloids understood this immediately. They realized the surrogacy controversy surrounding Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had become the perfect media machine because it never required resolution to stay alive. Headlines were carefully written to imply mystery without technically making direct accusations. Questions replaced statements. Suspicion replaced certainty. Words like hidden, unanswered, behind palace walls, and what they won't say started dominating coverage. And psychologically, that framing is incredibly powerful because once people feel like information is being withheld, they begin connecting dots, whether those dots belong together or not. The most fascinating part was how verified facts slowly became background noise, while speculation became the emotional center of the story. Official royal birth announcements existed. Archie's birth certificate existed. Public records existed. The palace had formally acknowledged both children through official royal channels. None of that changed. None of it collapsed under scrutiny. But facts are quiet. Facts don't generate adrenaline. Questions do. Suspicion does. And the media ecosystem knows that uncertainty keeps audiences emotionally invested far longer than certainty ever could. Anonymous palace insiders became fuel poured directly onto the fire. Every few days, another unnamed source appeared somewhere hinting at tension behind palace walls. Not enough to verify anything, not enough to completely dismiss either. Just enough ambiguity to keep viewers trapped inside the cycle. And ambiguity is dangerous because people instinctively fill informational gaps with imagination. Once imagination enters a controversy, the narrative stops operating logically. It begins operating emotionally. Then came the deeper psychological shift. Audiences stopped asking, is there evidence? And started asking, why does this feel suspicious? That difference changed everything, because feelings are much harder to dismantle than claims. Once enough people emotionally sense concealment, every royal move begins looking strategic. Routine privacy suddenly appears orchestrated. Formal palace language starts sounding rehearsed. Even silence itself starts feeling staged. And that is exactly the trap Buckingham Palace fell into. The monarchy was built for a different era, an era where institutions controlled information flow, an era where silence projected authority rather than uncertainty. But modern digital culture doesn't reward silence anymore. It punishes it. Online audiences interpret absence as suspicion because the internet trains people to believe that if something isn't being addressed directly, there must be a reason. Buckingham Palace continued operating under the old royal philosophy while social media operated under an entirely different psychological system. And those two worlds collided violently. Suddenly, the palace's carefully measured communications started looking less like professionalism and more like evasion. Observers dissected every phrase, every omission, every carefully chosen word. Royal statements that would once have passed unnoticed were now being analyzed like coded messages hiding deeper truths. And the terrifying thing for the institution was this: once audiences begin reading between the lines themselves stop mattering. And that is why this scandal became so uniquely dangerous for Buckingham Palace. Not because evidence suddenly surfaced, but because the institution lost control of interpretation. The palace could manage official announcements, it could manage protocol, it could manage press releases, but it could no longer manage perception once millions of people began interpreting silence as part of the narrative itself. What makes this entire situation genuinely unsettling is that both sides believe they are defending something important. Critics argue transparency protects institutional legitimacy. Defenders argue privacy protects basic human dignity. And trapped between those two positions is a royal family discovering that modern audiences no longer automatically trust silence the way previous generations once did. The palace never gave the dramatic denial people expected. The explosive proof critics predicted never arrived either. Yet somehow the story only grew larger with time. That's the part that should make everyone uncomfortable, because it reveals how modern controversies survive independently of evidence once repetition, suspicion, and emotional framing take over. Once a narrative gains enough momentum online, it becomes almost impossible to stop, because audiences stop consuming information objectively. They begin consuming it as identity, instinct, and emotional certainty. And maybe that's the real scandal hiding underneath everything. Not whether the allegations themselves are true or false, but how easily public belief can be reshaped simply through sustained uncertainty. How silence can start sounding louder than statements. How repeated questions begin masquerading as answers. And how an institution built on centuries of controlled image management suddenly found itself trapped inside an information era where control disappears the moment the audience stops trusting what it's told.